July 17, the 1945. Late afternoon in Chicago. On the second floor of the metallurgical laboratory at the University of Chicago, the air is too warm and smells faintly of tobacco, ink, and hot metal from the machine shop below. Leo Szilard stands at a cluttered desk, a single sheet of paper laid out in front of him, like contraband. His wire-rimmed glasses have inched down his nose again, and he doesn't notice. He's reading the words for the 100th time, lips moving silently. To the President of the United States. The overhead fan ticks uselessly, barely stirring the heavy July heat. Outside the tall window, the campus is green and quiet students, crossing the quad with books under their arms, unaware that 2 floors up men in rumpled shirts are deciding how many more cities might burn. A knock sounds at the door. "Come, Szilard," says his Hungarian accent, flattening the vowel. The door opens to admit Edward Teller, lanky sharp, featured a cigarette already burning between his fingers. He shuts the door, quickly glancing down the hallway first, as if a general might be lurking outside the physics department. "You're still working on it?" Teller asks, exhaling a thin stream of smoke. Szilard taps the page with one finger. "It's finished." "Words are cheap, Edward. It is the signatures that are expensive." On the desk beside the petition lies a clipboard with several names already written in hurried, cramped hands. Physicists, chemists, metallurgists. Men who have done the calculations for critical mass, designed tamper materials, calculated blast radii on scratch paper over cold coffee. "How many?" Teller asks. "More than 70 have agreed in principle," Szilard says. But agreeing in principle is not the same as signing. They know the security officers will not forget their names. Teller moves closer, peering at the text. He reads aloud, softly. "We, the undersigned scientists, believe that the United States should not resort to the use of atomic bombs in this war unless the terms have first been made public." His voice trails off. The words hang in the room like a dangerous experiment, one that may or may not go critical. "You really think Truman will listen?" Teller asks. Szilard's eyes flick up sharply. He must listen. Once Hiroshima is destroyed, or Nagasaki, or some other city, the world will not go back. But perhaps we can prevent the 3rd bomb. The 4th, the 10th. The chain reaction of politics is no less dangerous than the one we began in uranium. He picks up a fountain pen, its nib stained dark blue, and straightens the petition. There is a formality to his movements, as if this is a ceremony. In a sense, it is. "You know Groves will hate this," Teller says. "The general does not like surprises, especially not moral ones." Szilard smiles without humor. General Groves can hate whatever he likes. This is not for him. It is for the president. He says the president as if he is invoking a distant, half-mythical figure. Harry S. Truman is a man. Szilard has never met a former haberdasher who inherited a war and a weapon that can end cities. Somewhere in Washington, this man is being briefed with charts and estimates and phrases like acceptable casualties. But not with this. Not yet. The door opens again, this time without a knock. A tall, dark-haired physicist in shirt sleeves, still dusted with chalk, slips in and closes the door behind him. "Leo," he says in a low voice. "They told me you were ready." Szilard holds up the petition. "Yes, Eugene. Read it carefully. Then decide if you are willing to have your name remembered for this." The man, one of Fermi's group, clever and tired and barely past 30, takes the page and reads. As his eyes move down the lines, a truck rumbles past the building outside. The window rattles faintly glass, humming in the frame. If the United States were to be the first to release this new means of indiscriminate destruction upon mankind, she would sacrifice public support throughout the world. He finishes exhales slowly and reaches instinctively for the pen. "I'll sign," he says. As he bends over the clipboard, Szilard watches the ink flow onto the paper, transforming private doubt into public defiance. Each signature is a risk of careers, ruined clearances, revoked reputations destroyed as surely as any building. There is an almost ritual silence as the man straightens and hands back the pen. "You think this will really reach Truman?" he asks. "Yes," Szilard says without hesitation. "We will send it through proper channels. To the Secretary of War, to the Interim Committee. It will be placed in front of the President, and then we will see whether he is the man he claims to be." He says it with certainty he does not feel, but doubt does not help. Another name is added, and another. The afternoon deepens. The hallway outside their office fills with footsteps, the murmur of voices, the squeak of shoes on linoleum. Word spreads quietly from office to office, lab to lab. A petition, a protest, an act of conscience inside a project built on secrecy and obedience. Some men read and sign without a word. Others argue. "You'll hand Japan a propaganda victory," one says. "What if the Germans had built it first?" "The Germans did not," Szilard replies, patience wearing thin. "And we are not Nazis." That is the whole point. A bespectacled chemist shakes his head, tapping the paper with a finger. "You're asking the president to gamble more American lives on a demonstration, a test on an empty island, a warning. What if Japan doesn't surrender? What then?" Szilard's voice is quiet. "Then at least the world will know we tried." The man doesn't sign. By early evening, the petition is thick with names, the ink smudged in places where someone's hand brushed the still wet lines. Szilard stands by the window, the pages in his hands now heavier than paper has any right to be. Below, the campus lights are coming on. Somewhere a radio playing in a dormitory window squawks out the latest from Europe. The war against Germany is over. The war against Japan is not. On a mesa in New Mexico, the first atomic fireball has already bloomed over the desert, turning sand into glass. Now the question is simple and unbearable. How many times will that light be allowed to rise? Szilard turns away from the window and faces the small group that has remained teller, a few younger physicists, a pair of chemists. Their faces are pale in the yellow light. "I will take it to our director," he says. "From there it will go to Compton, to the military liaisons, to Washington. It must be placed in the right hands. And if it isn't, someone asks." Szilard folds the petition carefully, as if it might break. Then history will remember that at least we tried to stop what came next. He slips the pages into a manila envelope, smooths the flap, and presses it closed with his thumb. Outside, the sky over Chicago is darkening, but the future he is trying to avert is brighter than the sun. The envelope, still warm from his hands, will begin a journey through the machinery of the American war state. It will pass across desks, through in boxes, hands turning it over, eyes assessing risk. Men in uniform, men in suits, men thinking about victory, not conscience. And somewhere far away from this cramped office and its smell of ink and sweat, decisions are already being made about a third bomb. 2 days later, Arthur Holly Compton holds the same manila envelope in his hands, its corners now slightly softened from travel. His office at the University of Chicago is neater than Szilard's shelves, lined with bound journals and tidy stacks of reports. Through the window, the lake glints faintly in the distance. Compton Nobel laureate administrator and reluctant custodian of this new weapon reads the petition, his lips pressed into a thin line. He has already heard Szilard's arguments. He has listened in committee rooms while Leo spoke of moral responsibility, of what would follow if the United States opened this particular door. Now the words are in front of him, addressed to the president. "You understand what you are asking me to do," Compton says at last. Szilard sits in a wooden chair opposite the desk hat in his hands. The small office feels like a courtroom. "I am asking you to transmit the views of your own scientists," Szilard replies. We have done what you asked us to do, Arthur. We have built the weapon. Now you must decide how it is used. Compton taps the petition with a forefinger. Leo, there is a chain of command. Civilian oversight, military responsibility. The interim committee is already considering how to employ the bomb. Stimson Burns, the president himself. They will say you are trying to interfere. Szilard leans forward. Interfere with what? With dropping it without warning on a city, with killing tens of thousands in a way the world has never seen. If that is what they plan, then yes. I would like to interfere. Compton removes his glasses and pinches the bridge of his nose. He is tired. They are all tired. There is also the matter of security, he says. This petition speaks of atomic bombs of policy. If it circulates too widely, if it leaks, it could jeopardize the whole project. The Army will not take that lightly. Szilard hears what he is really saying. The Army will not take me lightly. Or Compton. Or anyone associated with this paper. Then send it under seal, Szilard says. Directly to the Secretary of War. To the President. You are respected, Arthur. They will read what you forward. Compton looks back down at the lines of cramped signatures, at the careful heading, the polite, almost legal phrasing. For a long moment he is silent. I will consider the best way to handle it, he says finally. But I cannot promise you that it will land where you want it to. Szilard stands. For a heartbeat, his hand hovers over the envelope, as if he is tempted to take it back to bypass all of this and somehow thrust it into Truman's hands himself. But that is fantasy. There are fences and guards and protocols between a Hungarian physicist and the Oval Office. He drops his hand. I can only ask that you try, he says. Compton nods slowly. I will try, Leo. The words sound sincere. They also sound like something else. Like political language. Like distance. Outside, the war machine grinds on. Washington, D.C. The Pentagon breathes in and out with the motion of thousands of men and women in uniform. Typewriters chatter. Shoes slam rhythmically along endless corridors. Telephones ring, are snatched up, slammed down. In one office, a major signs routing slips, without really reading them, his wrist moving in a practiced arc. In another, a colonel argues over priorities for shipping plutonium casting molds. On a polished wooden desk, a leathern box holds a dozen envelopes. Reports from Los Alamos. Memoranda from General Groves. Requests for additional construction crews. Each has a small routing slip, clipped to it an arterial map through the bureaucracy. Somewhere eventually, Compton's response and Szilard's petition will join them. Oak Ridge, Tennessee. General Leslie Groves is not a man who likes surprises. Thick-set, blunt, radiating authority, he has turned what began as a collection of university projects into a continental-scale enterprise. To him, the bomb is an engineering problem and a logistics problem. The moral questions are luxuries to be handled by civilians in Washington, if at all. A courier folder arrives on his desk, marked with the familiar security stamps. Groves flips through the contents quickly. Progress reports, yield estimates, and then a cover letter from Compton. He reads, frowning. Compton mentions a petition circulating among the metallurgical laboratory staff, urges that the views of the scientists be given careful consideration before any further use of the weapon against Japan. The actual petition is included folded behind the letter. Groves reads Szilard's words, his expression darkening line by line. Scientists urging delay. Scientists urging a demonstration. Scientists asking that political leaders consider the future of mankind before employing the bomb again. He sets the pages down and stares at them for a moment, jaw working. From Groves's point of view, the situation is simple. The United States is at war. The Japanese have shown no sign of surrender. Every week of delay costs lives in the Pacific on ships and beaches and prisoner-of-war camps. The bomb is a weapon. Weapons are meant to be used. The strategy is for the president and his advisors, not for theoretical physicists from Europe. He picks up a pencil and scrawls a note in the margin of Compton's letter. The words are brief, curt, and administrative dismissal, dressed in polite language. The petition he suggests should not be allowed to interfere with operational plans. Then he passes the folder to his aide. File with other scientists' correspondence, he says. Forward a copy to the secretary's office for the record. For the record, not for decision. The aide nods. The petition, that fragile attempt to reach the man at the top, has entered the bloodstream of the bureaucracy. Its path from here will depend not on the urgency of its message, but on habits, routines, the quiet judgments of overworked staff officers who have never heard of Leo Szilard. In Potsdam, Germany, President Harry S. Truman sits at a long table with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, discussing surrender terms, occupation zones, the future of Europe. In between sessions, his advisors speak to him in low voices about a test in the New Mexico desert. Mr. President, the device worked. It was spectacular. We now have a new weapon of unusual destructive force. Truman listens, nods, thinking about leverage, about how this changes his conversations with Stalin, about how it might shorten the war with Japan. On his desk back in Washington, a place is already cleared for incoming documents. Daily briefings, intelligence estimates, memos from the War Department. The petition from Szilard and his colleagues is not there. It is in a file in a drawer in an office down the chain, its message mired in layers of classification and caution. The scientists have spoken, but their voices are muffled by paper. In Chicago, Leo Szilard waits for news. No telegram comes. No messenger appears at his door. The days are filled with ordinary work calculations, lab meetings, the hum of experimental setups, but something hangs over it all like a storm that might or might not break. He has launched his small, fragile boat into a vast, churning sea of power and politics. He has no idea it is already sinking beneath the waves. August 6, the 1945. Morning, Chicago. The radio sits on a metal shelf in the corner of the lab, its brown fabric grill stained with dust. Most days it murmurs quietly, music under the clink of glassware and the scratch of chalk. Today, it shouts. We interrupt this program for an important announcement from the White House. At 11:00 a.m. Eastern Wartime, the President of the United States issued the following statement. Heads turn. Hands pause over notebooks. A technician reaches out and nudges the volume knob higher. An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima, an important Japanese army base. That bomb had more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The words sink into the room like a weight. For a brief, stunned moment, no one moves. Leo Szilard is standing by a blackboard, a piece of chalk between his fingers. He has been explaining neutron flux distributions to a graduate student. The diagram on the board hangs unfinished, arcs, arrows, numbers. His hand stops in midair. The announcer continues reading from Truman's statement, describing a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The phrase is triumphal, almost proud. Hiroshima. The city has a name now. The chalk clatters to the floor. No one breathes. Someone fumbles with a cigarette and drops it. The graduate student whispers, "My God." Szilard walks slowly to the radio, as if distance matters, as if standing closer can change the sound spilling from the box. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. A rain of ruin. Szilard reaches out and clicks the radio off. The sudden silence roars in his ears. He can feel every eye on him. So he says quietly, "We were too late, or we were ignored. No one answers. In the hall, a door opens. Voices echo. The outside world goes on. Inside this lab, the floor feels slightly tilted, as if gravity has shifted. "Did your petition reach them?" one of the chemists asks. Szilard looks at the empty radio face the small glass dial that still glows faintly. "I do not know," he says. He suspects he knows. Washington, D.C. 2 hours before the announcement goes out over the radio, a mid-level civilian official in the War Department leans over a metal filing cabinet in a cramped office that smells of paper and sweat. His name is unremarkable, his tie slightly crooked. He is not a cabinet secretary or a general. His job is to keep track of correspondence related to a single, highly classified project. He files logs, routes. He decides what rises and what sinks. On his desk is a folder marked with the familiar code names. Inside are several items: a copy of Compton's letter, an internal memo summarizing conversations among scientists, and the petition itself. He has read it once, already late in July. He has written a summary for his superiors. A group of project personnel have expressed concern regarding potential use of further atomic bombs against Japanese cities. They recommend a demonstration or prior warning. He has underlined potential interference with operational plans in his notes. Now, on the morning of August 6th, he opens the folder again. Not out of conscience. He is updating the file before it is boxed and sent to long-term storage. The operation in the Pacific is moving fast. Policy is set. Orders have been drafted and signed. The B-29 called Enola Gay is already on its way home. He flips through the pages, then slides the petition back into the folder. His hand hovers for a second, and he has a tiny private thought that will never appear in any record. "I hope the scientists are wrong about what this leads to." Then he closes the file, scribbles a notation on the label, and drops it into the bottom drawer. The drawer slams with a dull metal clank that no one hears outside the room. The path to the Oval Office is closed. Potsdam is over. Truman has left Germany, the knowledge of the successful test at Trinity sitting like a secret advantage in his pocket throughout the conference. On the cruiser, Augusta returning across the Atlantic, he has already decided that the bomb will be used. Briefings speak of saving American lives, of forcing a swift surrender. No one mentions a petition from Chicago. No one asks if a group of foreign-born physicists had reservations. The president has been shown photographs of the Desert Fireball charts with casualty estimates, diagrams of B-29 bomb bays. He has not been shown Szilard's carefully phrased warning about the future of mankind. In a government built on paper, the most important thing is not what is written. It is what is placed in front of whom. Back in Chicago, word of Hiroshima spreads not just by radio, but in tight knots of men in hallways and mess halls beside vending machines that rattle when you bump them. They actually did it. Did you hear the yield they claim? 20,000 tons, they say. Leo, do you believe that? Szilard listens, answers when pressed, but his mind is elsewhere. He is thinking of the petition, of the signatures, of that envelope in his hands. He goes to Compton's office again. Arthur Compton looks older than he did a few weeks ago. The lines around his eyes are deeper. He gestures Szilard into a chair and closes the door. "You have heard the news," Compton says. "I have," Szilard replies. "I would like to know what became of our petition." Compton hesitates, fingers drumming lightly on his blotter. "It was forwarded through the appropriate channels. To Washington. To the War Department. I know that the Secretary was made aware of your concerns in general terms." "In general terms," Szilard repeats. The words taste bitter. "Not in our own," Compton sighs. "Leo, by the time your petition arrived, decisions were already well advanced. The interim committee had met. The president had been briefed. There was tremendous momentum in favor of using the bomb to end the war quickly." Szilard leans forward. We did not ask them not to use it at all. We asked them not to use it again without warning, to consider a demonstration, an empty island, a remote bay, a place where no one would die. Compton spreads his hands, a helpless gesture. They were not inclined to take advice from scientists on matters of strategy. Szilard feels a cold, hollow anger settling inside him. Then why did they ever listen to us at all? Compton looks away. Outside, a train horn sounds faintly, as if from another country. That evening, Szilard walks alone along a quiet street near the university. The air smells of cut grass and coal smoke. Houses glow softly, families inside gathered around their radios, just as his lab had been. You can almost hear it if you imagine the president's voice relayed and repeated the awe and pride and fear. One bomb, one city. But not the last. Szilard thinks of the third bomb already being prepared. The core of plutonium that technicians in Los Alamos are shaping and polishing, weighing and measuring. A sphere of metal no bigger than a grapefruit cradled like a newborn child. A device that still might fall on Kokura or Niigata or some other name that has not yet become a synonym for annihilation. He had hoped that a letter, a petition 70 names in ink, might wedge itself into the gears, might slow them. Now he sees the scale of the machine he has tried to stop. You might imagine yourself walking there with him, feeling the gravel crunch under your shoes, seeing the windows glow warm on either side, knowing what he knows. Knowing that across an ocean under a sky that shares the same stars, a city has just been turned into a furnace. And that in Washington the voice that tried to prevent the next one is not being heard. August 8th, 1945. Evening, Los Alamos, New Mexico. The air on the mesa is thin and dry, tasting faintly of dust and metal. Sodium lamps cast small islands of yellow light along the dirt roads. In one of the lab buildings, a group of technicians stand around a metal table, their sleeves rolled up, their hands encased in thin rubber gloves. On the table rests something that looks absurdly ordinary at first glance, a dull gray sphere cradled in a padded ring, no larger than a grapefruit. The plutonium core. The third one. They call it simply the next unit. It has a serial number, a mass measured to fractions of a gram, a carefully recorded density. It is cool to the touch, heavy, deceptively solid. Inside at the atomic level, it is seething. The men work methodically, checking for imperfections, measuring tolerances, logging each step. They know what happened over Hiroshima. Rumors raced across the mesas faster than any official announcement. Some saw the first reconnaissance photographs in a closed briefing, a white circle of ruin on a map of Japan. One of the younger technicians' freckles burned into his nose by the high desert sun glances at the core as he notes a reading on his clipboard. "You think they will use this one too?" he asks quietly. The senior man beside him does not look up. "It is not our job to think about that," he answers. "We prepare it. The officers decide the rest." Above them, on the hilltop, the administration building glows with light. Inside, phone lines connect Los Alamos to the War Department, to Pacific Air Forces, to the target committee that has argued over which cities are suitable. In a locked safe nearby is a copy of the order that authorized the use of special bombs against Japan as soon as they are ready without further presidential approval. No one in that chain of orders has read Szilard's petition. Chicago. The same night. Leo Szilard sits at his desk, a single lamp illuminating a small circle of paper on the blotter. Outside, the city hums with ordinary life. Streetcars rattle. Radios spill out swing music and war news. Somewhere, a couple argue softly in a walk-up apartment. On Szilard's desk lies a carbon copy of the petition he drafted in July. The thin paper is smudged at the edges, the type slightly blurred from duplication. 70 names march down the pages in ink. He reads the paragraphs again, as if he is searching for some flaw in the words. "We, the undersigned scientists, have been working in the field of atomic power for a considerable time. He hears again the voices in the lab when he approached each man, the hesitation, the brief calculation behind their eyes. Careers. Security clearances. The possibility of being marked as unreliable. We feel that the United States should not resort to the use of atomic bombs in this war unless the terms which will be imposed after the war on Japan have been made public. He can recite it now without looking. The key passage still catches at him, a hinge on which the whole argument swings. If after the war, a situation is allowed to develop in the world which permits rival powers to be in uncontrolled possession of these new means of destruction, the cities of the United States as well as the cities of other nations will be in continuous danger of sudden annihilation. He had written those words in a quiet office in Chicago. The men in Washington had not placed them on the president's desk. He looks toward the dark window, seeing only his own reflection. A middle-aged man with thinning hair, a tie pulled loose at the collar eyes that have not slept well. In his mind, he can see a city he has never visited. A coastal valley, narrow streets, wooden houses, a harbor where fishing boats rock gently. Nagasaki. Tomorrow, it is scheduled to be only the secondary target. He has no way of knowing that. What he does know is that a second bomb has already fallen or will fall within hours. That the momentum is carrying events beyond his reach. He feels something he rarely admits to helplessness. Tokyo. In a dim sandbagged room, deep beneath the Imperial Palace, officers stare at a map of Japan pricked with colored pins. A staff captain reads a report in a flat voice, describing what little they know of the weapon that destroyed Hiroshima. The word atomic appears in intercepted American broadcasts. Some within the Japanese high command argue that these claims are exaggeration, a trick. Others have seen reconnaissance photographs and are no longer sure of anything. Outside, the night is hot and still. Air raid sirens do not sound. Not tonight. August 9, the 1945. Morning, Washington. Harry S. Truman sits in the cabinet room, a stack of dispatches in front of him. The light falls through the window onto the polished table, glinting off water glasses and pens. News has come in during the night. The Soviet Union has declared war on Japan. Russian armies are moving into Manchuria. Some advisors see this as the final pressure needed for Tokyo to crack. Others urge that the second bomb be used quickly to demonstrate that Hiroshima was not an isolated miracle. The president has already given his broad approval. The operational order stands. He is told that if the weather holds, another attack will go forward. He lifts his glasses, rubs his eyes, and signs other documents on other matters. Veterans, benefits, lend-lease, the minutiae of government in wartime. On his desk, there is no folder labeled petition from atomic scientists. No memorandum from a Leo Szilard urging caution. No summary of 70 men in Chicago asking that the next bomb be used only as a demonstration, not on another city full of civilians. The window rattles faintly as a truck passes on Pennsylvania Avenue. Truman looks up for a moment, then returns to his papers. Above Japan, a B-29 called Boxcar claws through a bank of clouds, fuel gauges lower than the pilot would like. The primary target, Kokura, has been obscured by smoke and haze. Anti-aircraft fire bristles below. With time and fuel running out, the crew swings south toward the secondary target, Nagasaki. On Chicago time, it is still late night when the bomb detonates. In the metallurgical laboratory, the clocks read just before midnight when the first fragmentary bulletins begin to appear on the wires. Another Japanese city hit. Reports of an atomic-type weapon. The details are confused, then sharpen into a new name. Nagasaki. Szilard hears it in a corridor, a whispered relay from someone who has just been in the communications office. They dropped another one. On Nagasaki. He closes his eyes for a moment, hand resting against the cool plaster wall. The corridor smells of disinfectant and old paint. Somewhere nearby, a typewriter clacks industriously, utterly out of place. He thinks of the third bomb again. the one after this. The core sitting on a mesa in New Mexico being polished and weighed. The shipping crates being prepared. The planning documents that speak of tertiary strike, late August. The petition had not stopped the second bomb. Perhaps, just maybe, it could still stop the third. August 10, 1945. Morning, Chicago. The newspapers hit the stands, still damp from the presses. On the front pages, stacked in metal racks on street corners, black letters shout, ATOM-ICBOMBHITSNA-GASA-KI. Below the headline there is a photograph of Truman, chin lifted, eyes narrowed. The caption calls him firm resolved, determined to end the war. Inside on page 3, in a column few will read closely, a reporter quotes unnamed sources about debate among scientists over the use of the bomb. No names, no details. The story is framed as a curiosity, almost a novelty. In his small office, Szilard reads it anyway, one hand pressed flat on the page. Scientists at Chicago, Oak Ridge, and Los Alamos are said to have expressed concern, the article notes, but officials in Washington insist that the decision to use the bomb rests solely with the president and his advisors. The words are cool and dismissive. They do not mention a petition. A knock interrupts his thoughts. It is Eugene Wigner, shoulders hunched, hat in his hands, as if he is intruding on a private grief. Leo, Wigner says softly. May I come in? Szilard gestures to the single chair opposite his desk. Wigner sits, eyes flicking to the newspaper. They say Nagasaki this time, Wigner says. Do you know if there will be another? Szilard folds the paper carefully. There is a third core already prepared, he says. I have heard as much from friends at Los Alamos. So unless something changes in Washington, yes, there will be another. They sit in silence for a moment. The ticking of the wall clock sounds too loud. You tried, Wigner says at last. We tried. The petition, the Frank report before that. We are not politicians. Szilard's mouth tightens. We built a weapon that can kill 100,000 people in an instant, he says. Apparently that is enough to make us indispensable when they want calculations. Not enough to make us worth listening to when we talk about what comes after. Wigner studies him. Do you still believe the president never saw your petition? Yes, Szilard says. I believe it never reached his desk. Washington, D.C. On the second floor of the War Department building, in a paneled office that smells faintly of cigar smoke and floor polish, Secretary of War Henry Stimson listens as an aide summarizes recent developments. Mr. Secretary, there have been some communications from project scientists, the aide says, consulting a file. Concerns about future use proposals for international control, suggestions that further attacks be preceded by a demonstration. Anything that requires immediate action, Stimson asks. No, sir, the aide replies. General Groves recommends that these views be noted, but not allowed to interfere with operational decisions. He believes some of the foreign-born personnel are inclined to overstep their proper role. Stimson exhales slowly, fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. He is an old man now, 78, his hands marked by age spots. He thinks of the diary entry he wrote only days before describing his own moral unease, and yet concluding that using the bomb might prevent an even bloodier invasion. File them, he says at last. Ensure that the president is kept informed in general terms, but we cannot have the impression that policy is being dictated from the laboratories. The aide nods. In his file is a brief summary that mentions a petition from Chicago without attaching the full text. The wording has been condensed, softened, stripped of its urgent pleas and specific warnings. The original pages with 70 signatures are in another folder further down the chain, already tagged as for the record. The White House. Harry Truman sits alone for a few minutes in the Oval Office between meetings. On his desk are the latest casualty reports from Okinawa and Iwo Jima, The intercepted Japanese cables suggesting factional struggle inside Tokyo, a draft of a statement about the bombs already used. He has been told that some scientists urged caution, that there were memoranda recommending a demonstration. The information reaches him like distant thunder muffled by layers of interpretation. His military advisors talk in numbers. Casualties avoided. Months shaved off the war. His political advisor, James Burns, talks of diplomatic positioning, of impressing the Soviets. No one walks in, holding a thin sheaf of paper, and says, "Mr. President, 70 of the men who built this weapon beg you not to drop another bomb on a city." If they had, would Truman's answer have been different? History never allows that experiment. Instead, he is given abstract summaries, the suggestion that some of the scientists are emotional, perhaps unbalanced by their proximity to the work. Men like Groves quietly reinforce the idea that allowing such people to influence strategy would set a dangerous precedent. The president straightens a stack of papers. He has already told his staff that he does not want another bomb dropped without his explicit approval. It is a small, instinctive break, born of the shock of the first photographs from Hiroshima. He has not decided how many breaks to apply. Los Alamos, that same day, the plutonium core sits in its padded cradle watched by guards and technicians. In a nearby office, a colonel on the phone takes notes as a voice from Washington crackles over the line. "Hold pending further instructions," the voice says. "Understood," the colonel replies. He circles a date on his planning calendar, then draws a question mark beside it. Outside, the pines sway in the hot afternoon wind. The mesa waits. No one here mentions a petition from Chicago. Back at the metallurgical laboratory, Szilard gathers a few trusted colleagues in a small conference room. The windows are open to the warm air, but the door is shut. "We may have failed to stop the second bomb," he says, standing at the head of the table. "But the third has not yet fallen. Japan is on the brink. The Soviets have entered the war. The Emperor is said to be finally listening to those who urge surrender. That is our only hope." One of the younger physicists frowns. "Do you think they will listen any more now than they did before Hiroshima?" Szilard hesitates. "I do not know," he admits, "but silence now would make us complicit." He proposes another letter, this one not a petition, but a direct appeal to Brigadier General Groves and to the interim policymakers, pressing the argument that further use on cities would harm America's moral standing and endanger its future security when other nations build their own bombs. Some of the men nod. Others stare at the table. At last, one of them speaks what many are thinking. "Leo, they already see us as meddlers. Foreigners. We take too much on ourselves. If we keep pushing, we may lose what little influence we still have." Szilard looks at him. "If our influence is so slight that it cannot be used to prevent another Nagasaki," he says quietly, "then it is not worth having." He leaves the meeting with a folder under his arm and a decision hardening in his mind. If the message cannot go up through the normal channels, perhaps it must go around them. August 13, 1945. Afternoon, Los Alamos. Storm clouds pile over the Jemez Mountains, purple and white, but the air on the mesa is still waiting. In a low concrete building, the plutonium core sits in its cradle on a metal table, watched by a bored sergeant and a technician flipping through a dog-eared magazine. On the wall hangs a schedule written in neat block letters. Crate preparation. Transport to Tinian. Assembly window late August. The third bomb has a place in the plane. A slot on a chart. A penciled-in date. The phone on the desk rings. The sergeant picks it up, listens, his expression changing from annoyance to something more alert. He glances at the core, then at the technician. "Yes, sir." "I will inform Colonel Ashworth," he says. He hangs up, and for a moment, the only sound is the hum of the overhead lights. "What is it?" the technician asks. "Orders from Washington," the sergeant replies. "Further preparations are to continue. but shipment is suspended pending direction from the president. The technician frowns. Suspended. Does that mean they will not use it? The sergeant shrugs. It means we wait. He looks at the gray sphere, the way one might look at a coiled snake that has suddenly been placed under glass. Outside, thunder mutters over the ridgeline. A few fat drops of rain spatter the dirt. The third bomb stays where it is. On paper, it exists. In physics, it exists. In history, it is balanced on the edge of a decision not yet made. Chicago. Leo Szilard is in his office again when the first rumors reach him. A colleague sticks his head through the door, face flushed. Leo, the Japanese have sent a message through the Swiss. They are willing to accept the Potsdam terms. There is some argument about the emperor, but it looks as if they may surrender. Szilard stands so quickly his chair bumps the wall behind him. Are you certain? As certain as anyone can be today, the man says. Washington is still weighing the reply. Szilard walks to the window. The campus outside is bright students passing in clumps, the war for them already half an abstraction. He presses his palm against the glass, feeling the faint warmth of the sun. If surrender comes now, he thinks the third bomb might never fly. The crater with its name might remain imaginary. He turns back to his desk and opens a drawer. Inside, among pencils and paper clips, lies the carbon copy of the petition. He lifts it out carefully and spreads it flat. 70 names a message that never reached the person it was meant for. He feels no triumph in the thought that history may soon vindicate his fear. Instead, he feels exhaustion, as if he has spent his strength pushing against a door only to find it opening for other reasons. August 14, the 1945. Evening, Washington. In the Oval Office, Harry Truman listens as his advisors lay out the situation one last time. The Japanese reply has been interpreted, argued over, discussed with allies. The emperor will remain as a symbol under Allied authority. The essential terms of unconditional surrender are intact. The Joint Chiefs assure him that they can accept. Truman leans back in his chair, eyes on the ceiling for a moment. The decision to use the bombs has marked him already. He has seen the photographs from Hiroshima and Nagasaki now. Blackened ruins, shadows on walls, bodies in makeshift hospitals wrapped in bandages that cannot hide what radiation does to flesh. He has already told his staff that no more atomic bombs are to be dropped without his express order. Now, with surrender at hand, he makes the unspoken explicit in his own mind. There will be no third city. He does not know it, but in Los Alamos, a core will stay on a table. In Tokyo, a people will soon listen to their emperor speak of enduring the unendurable. In Chicago, a Hungarian physicist will lower himself slowly into a chair, listening to the distant roar of joy in the streets. The president has never read Szilard's petition. He has never seen the pages of signatures. The moral line he is drawing tonight is his own, drawn from his Methodist upbringing, his political instincts, his horror at what he has unleashed. Yet for the men in the labs, it will look later like a faint answer to a question they shouted into a closed room. August 15, the 1945. The news bursts over America like a dam giving way. VJ Day. Victory over Japan. Church bells. Car horns. Crowds spilling into streets with flags and confetti. Sailors kiss strangers in Times Square. 100 small private celebrations bloom in homes, bars, sidewalks. In Chicago, the university quad fills with students laughing, some climbing lampposts, others dancing to a tinny jazz record dragged outside. A group of lab workers stand on the edge of it, all coats still on, badges still in their pockets, as if they are not quite part of the same world. Wigner finds Szilard on the steps of a building watching the crowd. "It appears your third bomb will remain unused," Wigner says. Szilard nods slowly. "For now. You cannot let yourself think only of the worst," Wigner says gently. Szilard looks at him, then back at the crowd. A young couple spins past the girl's hair, flying the boy's cap askew. They look impossibly alive, impossibly unaware of how close a different future came. "I'm thinking of the pattern," Szilard says. "We created a weapon that gives one nation the power to destroy cities in an instant. That power will not remain in one nation's hands. Others will build their own bombs. Perhaps in 10 years, perhaps in 20. Once that happens, every city in the world will live under the shadow that Hiroshima saw first." He taps the folded petition against his knee. "We tried to warn them of that. Not just about the Japanese, about what comes after." Wigner is quiet. Around them, people shout and sing, their voices echoing off stone. Years later, in quieter times, committees will convene to study the birth of the atomic age. Historians will request access to files. Boxes will be opened. Among the memoranda and reports, someone will find a folder labeled with an old code name. Inside thin paper, 70 signatures. A date, July 1945. The petition will be read, cited, discussed. It will become part of the story people tell about how the bomb was used and about the scientists who tried to stop its further use. For Szilard, the story is simpler and harsher. In the summer, when it mattered, a group of men who understood what they had built tried to speak to power. Their message was softened, summarized, shuffled, and eventually shelved. The president never saw their words in time to let them shape his decisions about Hiroshima or Nagasaki. The third bomb did not fall, but not because the petition succeeded. It stayed on the table because war politics and surrender converged in a way that made its use unnecessary. In the end, that distinction matters to Leo Szilard. Standing at a window one evening, looking out over the city lights, he imagines those same pinpoints of brightness mapped across the globe. London, Moscow, New York, Tokyo. Cities full of people who do not know his name, who will never read his petition, but who live in the world it was trying in its small way to avert. He rests his hand on the glass, feeling the faint vibration of traffic below. Next time he murmurs half to himself, "They must listen before the fire, not after." Behind him on a shelf, the carbon copy of the petition lies folded, the ink beginning to fade. Outside, the atomic age has already begun.